So, have you ever wondered if there's just one single perfect way to lead a team? I mean, we've all heard the whole great man theory, right? That classic idea that effective leaders are just born with this universal set of superior qualities that work absolutely everywhere. But when you really look at the real world, does that actually hold up? Think about it. Can the exact same general who brilliantly leads a military combat unit just seamlessly walk in and run a creative ad agency? Probably not, right?
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely unpack Fred Fiedler's contingency leadership theory. This is a genuinely fascinating framework because it completely flips the traditional view of leadership right on its head. It basically says, hey, effective leadership? It's literally all about context.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with busting the perfect leader myth, then break down Fiedler's contingency theory and how the LPC scale actually works. After that, we'll see history in action with Churchill and JFK, evaluate the theory's pros and cons, and finally, look at how to actually match leaders to situations. Let's jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the perfect leader myth. For a really long time, management training has heavily focused on teaching leaders that they need to adapt. Think of Hersey and Blanchard's situational leadership model. It tells leaders they should constantly shift their approach based on exactly who they're managing. But contingency theory, it takes a completely different path. It argues that your core leadership style is actually relatively fixed. You can't just flip a switch and suddenly be a completely different kind of leader. So to put it simply, while situational leadership teaches you to change how you sit, contingency theory says, actually, you need to change the chair to fit the leader. Moving to Section 2, Fiedler's contingency theory. This revolutionary framework was introduced by Austrian psychologist Fred Fiedler back in 1967. And get this, he developed it after studying over 800 different groups across both military and industrial settings. His massive takeaway shifts the focus directly to the environment. The central claim here is that your default leadership style, whether you are naturally motivated by tasks or motivated by relationships, is largely stable. It's very much like your underlying personality. You don't try to change the leader. Instead, you match the leader to the specific situation. Which brings us to Section 3, the LPC scale explained. How do we figure out that default style?
Well, I want you to try a quick exercise with me. Think about the absolute worst person you've ever worked with. Go ahead, take a deep breath. We all have one. The colleague you found just the hardest to collaborate with, maybe someone who just absolutely drove you crazy. Got them in your head? Okay, now, do you see any redeeming qualities in them at all, or do you rate them pretty harshly across the board?
Believe it or not, this little thought experiment is the entire basis of Fiedler's least preferred coworker, or LP scale. If you gave that difficult coworker harsh ratings across the board, Fiedler says you have a low LP score, and that means you're task-oriented. You prioritize structure, getting things done, efficiency. On the flip side, if you could still find anything positive to say about your absolute worst collaborator, you have a high LP score. You're relationship-oriented, meaning you naturally focus on personal connections, building trust, and managing team conflict.
Once you know your own style, Fiedler says you have to evaluate the environment around you. He measures what he calls situational favorableness, using 3 distinct factors just to see how much control a leader actually has. Number 1, leader-member relations. Basically, how much trust and loyalty does the team have in you? Number 2, task structure. Are the goals and procedures crystal clear, or are they completely vague? And number 3, position power. How much formal authority do you actually have to reward or punish people?
Fiedler mapped all of this out on a brilliant 8-octant continuum. It illustrates the 8 possible situations you could find yourself in, ranging from very favorable on one side to very unfavorable on the other. And honestly, here's the absolute genius of his discovery. Task-motivated or low LPC leaders perform best at the extreme ends. They thrive when things are highly favorable and they can just execute, or when things are highly unfavorable and they need to step in and forcefully establish order. But in that moderate middle, where things are a bit ambiguous and complex, that's where relationship-motivated high LPC leaders truly excel, because they use their interpersonal skills to navigate all those messy gray areas.
Let's see what this looks like in the real world with Section 4, History in Action, featuring Churchill and JFK. It's one thing to talk about theories, but let's see this in practice during some incredibly high-stakes moments. Think about Sir Winston Churchill during World War II. He faced a highly unfavorable situation. Overwhelming odds, massive uncertainty, just a literal existential threat. According to Fiedler's model, this is the exact environment where a low LPC, highly directive, task-oriented leader shines. Churchill didn't have the luxury of sitting around focusing on feelings. He needed to impose clear direction, rally the nation, and focus entirely on the monumental task of survival and victory. It was a perfect match of a specific leader and a specific situation.
Now, conversely, let's look at John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was a moderately favorable but highly complex situation. The U.S. had significant power, sure, but the path forward was totally unclear and fraught with the very real risk of global nuclear war. JFK successfully applied a relationship-oriented style. He utilized his executive committee, he valued diverse opinions, and most importantly, he relied heavily on back-channel diplomacy and communication with Soviet Premier Khrushchev to de-escalate the tension. In a moderate control environment, his high LPC style quite literally prevented a catastrophe.
Moving on to Section 5, Evaluating the Theory.
Like any major organizational psychology model, Fiedler's framework has some really strong merits, but also some notable flaws. We can objectively evaluate its usefulness by breaking down 4 specific advantages and 4 specific disadvantages.
Let's start with the good stuff. First, it delivers a very realistic view of management. It acknowledges that leaders aren't these mythical superheroes who can just magically succeed anywhere. Second, it offers incredible predictive power. I mean, if you know the situation and the leader's style, you can reasonably predict their effectiveness. Third, it provides options for organizations to build leadership profiles and place employees where they'll do their best work. And fourth, it creates state-oriented management, forcing us to seriously consider the massive impact of the specific environment rather than just blaming or praising the person.
However, critics have pointed out some major flaws. First off, it's highly reactive rather than proactive. It tells you who fits where, but it doesn't necessarily help a leader proactively shape the future. Second, it lacks a specific course of action. It doesn't tell a manager how to handle a specific crisis on a random Tuesday afternoon. Third, the complexity of measurement is a real issue. The LPC scale is often criticized as being pretty clunky, and honestly, self-assessment isn't always reliable. I mean, what if your least preferred coworker genuinely was just a terrible person? Finally, the rigid assumption that a leadership style is completely fixed can feel a bit discouraging. Modern research suggests leaders actually can learn to adapt over time, even if they have a strong default style.
Finally, Section 6, Matching Leaders to Situations. Bringing it all together, the crucial practical takeaway for your own team is this. If a leader's struggling, don't just send them to a weekend seminar hoping they'll come back on Monday with a completely new personality. Fiedler's prescription is super clear. Engineer the situation to match the leader you have. If you've got a highly task-oriented manager failing in a complex, moderate control environment, maybe you need to restructure the department to give them more formal power and clearer goals. Or move them to a turnaround project where their decisive nature is exactly what's needed. Remember, performance comes from the perfect fit, not from absolute leader quality in a vacuum. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Look around your own workplace right now. Are the struggling managers in your organization actually bad leaders? Or are they just sitting in the wrong seat? Are you placing the right leaders in the right situations, or is your organization just blaming them when their natural style doesn't fit the environment? Understanding context might just be the absolute key to unlocking the true potential of your team. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into contingency leadership.